Hello my brothers and sisters of the Order, welcome back to the Order. I'm Celtic Templar and welcome back to the Order. And welcome back to another how-to video. And today y'all, we're actually going to be covering the Gallowglass. Now, not many of y'all voted for this one sadly, so yeah, we had to put it in 4th place. Now, the early Gallowglass, I can already hear many people already questioning this gear, saying, "Oh, Templar, this isn't a Gallowglass, they look nothing like the pictures or anything I've seen on the internet that I typed up." Well, here's the thing. Just because you type up the word Gallowglass doesn't mean you're actually going to get the correct equipment. Because one, whenever we think of the Gallowglass, we automatically think of a Irish warrior pretty much well with a two-handed greatsword, or as well a two-handed battle axe that looks like this. And in fact, they automatically end up looking as though they wore a Merion helmet, or as well the late period style helmets from the 15th century, or as well even sometimes that of the 16th century, or as well even sometimes the Scottish bassinet as it's called. But for historical points, during the early periods, the 13th century Gallowglass looked nothing like that. Probably they look somewhat like this. Now, the accounts of the Gallowglass vary from early periods. In fact, during the 13th century, there is little known records about them, ever what their equipment was or what they looked like. So I had to go on what I could find on, mostly from historical manual scripts. Now, many tomb decorations, as we understand, do give us a good information about the Gallowglass. Problem is, those are later periods, so they can't exactly give us most information. So many people do want to know is, okay, Templar, what did the Gallowglass look like? What did they fight like? Well, their main weapon wouldn't be a two-handed greatsword, as we know from later periods. It would actually be a two-handed great axe, something like this. Now, there were different variations on design. There wasn't one uniform design of Gallowglass battle axe like this, as we would later understand. They would have multi-personal designs. Some meant for cutting and thrusting design, others for light attack units like this, which means it was both lighter but yet still effective for a good cutting blow. Other accounts also state they used a heavy two-handed great axe like this. This was probably the biggest one of them all. Now, there are accounts from the Normans that, who invaded Ireland and such that actually portrayed them as demons in men's clothing or devils in men's flesh, seeing to the fact they showed no mercy to their opponent, and as well, they proudly died on the battlefield with honor. They were truly fearless, and they would not retreat or back down. That actually says how these people would have fought. Now, it's even stated that their axes were stated to cleave both through the leg of a man on his horse and through the horse and onto the opposite side, hacking the man's both of his legs off. So, I can already imagine how horrifying that could actually be. Just imagine how horrifying the strength might have been just to wield something like that. Now, here's the thing though, I don't know if that's true or not, but because one, medieval historians kinda like to rattle around on history bits that make sense, so yeah. Now, other accounts of their equipment would also vary from swords. Some of the swords looked like an Anglo-Norman style. Other accounts stated they looked more like a early variation of the Scottish design, or as well, late Norman or late Norwegian design. Now, they would also use a single-handed, multi-handed style tool axe, which they could use, especially when they lost their great axe. Other accounts also state they would use a elongated dagger or knife, known as a dirk, or dirk, as we call it today. The dirk was stated to actually be somewhere between 1.5 to at least 2 feet long. Now, this is about almost like 1.5 feet, I believe. Actually, this is like, yeah, I think this is like 1 foot in general. So just imagine how much longer that thing could have been. That is kind of a horrifying aspect to understand about these guys. Now, the most common thing about the Gallowglass would be this, their tunic. The tunic would be the most common thing they would have actually worn. It would have been a yellow design. this would have actually showed off that they are the Gallowglass. Now, their armor would mostly be mail. They would hardly wear any plate armor, except for their helmet. Now, the helmet I'm wearing is a Norman-style nasal helm, which, during that point in time period, this is actually what they did wear. They did wear a variety of nasal helms, but pretty much they were still always the nasal helm. Now, some accounts state that they wore mail coifs. Other accounts stated that the mail coif was attached to the helmet and when they put it on. So other accounts state that the mail was fully attached to the hauberk. Other accounts state they wore no mail coif. And also, one of the most very rare accounts stated that they had the mail coif attached to both the helmet and the hauberk, making it as a uniformal type equipment armor. Which kind of makes sense. Now, what about arm defense? Well, honestly, they probably wore none. In fact, there is little known account of them ever wearing such. Now, there is some accounts that state they wore a vambrace, which is this, but I don't know if they would have worn that or not, since there's little known evidence to it. Because one, there's hardly any pictorial evidence, and there's hardly any mention of it. So, I wouldn't go that as the most common thing they would have worn. But as well, their footwear would mostly vary from variation to variation. But there is many accounts that actually state that they probably would have worn no form of footwear on the battlefield, especially during the hot months in Ireland and Scotland when it got so boggy they needed to wear no footwear in order to fight, especially during those time periods. In fact, many Anglo-Norman knights actually stated on how the heat affected them so much that many Gallowglass didn't actually wear pants. Can you just imagine that? Actually, just on the battlefield, you see a wild warrior charging at you with a great axe, yet he's not wearing anything underneath his gambeson or his tunic. Although, seeing to the fact how long the tunic is, I wouldn't be surprised that they would have done that. Now, there are many accounts that state that the Gallowglass were the most feared warriors on the battlefield during this point in time in the British Isles. Reason being, these guys feared nothing. And the fact is, originally they came from the Western Isles of Scotland. Now many people automatically say that they're Irish. That doesn't come around until the timeline of the 14th to 15th century, seeing to the fact that they had actually intermarried with the Irish population, mainly because when they had to fight against none other than, well, the Norman knights, and actually kept them at bay for several hundred years. The Gallowglass were actually stated to be the fearsome warriors of Ireland's spirit. So much so that many Irishmen volunteered to be part of the said Gallowglass and became part of it. There's one thing though. In order to become a Gallowglass, you actually had to prove yourself. In fact, they would actually have a ring or a circle, that of which would, do a sparring match against one of the weakest Gallowglass, it's stated, to go up against them. And the Gallowglass would not use their battle axes, but use a wooden shaft of their axe as a type of pole weapon. And this was a form of training type of method they did. And the scary part is, many new recruits died from doing this. So in doing so, if you didn't prove yourself doing that, you're technically a dead man. Now, the Gallowglass were retrofitted with various types of equipment and armor. And, or I say various, but it depends on their wealth and status. Because one, it's actually stated a huge requirement of the Gallowglass is that they wear a gambeson, and as well, a helmet and some form of mail. So, probably the most lowly born version of the Gallowglass would probably have a helmet, mail, and just the gambeson. With me, I got also the hauberk as well. So, yeah. Now, we can see why the Gallowglass are feared on the battlefield. So, why, I hear many of you already asking, Templars, did they use shields? Actually, there is many accounts that stated they did not use shields. The Gallowglass were such a feared warrior culture that these guys charged headlong into the fray of the battlefield and would not stop fighting. It's actually stated by one Norman account that stated that one Gallowglass cleaved through night after night until he actually hacked at least through 30 mounted knights. Just imagine that, of how horrifying you could actually see one man hacking through 30 of your own men with nothing more than a great axe. This guy probably cleaved a line probably straight through, and this is probably why the Gallowglass alone were so feared, which is kind of why many Anglo-Normans kind of ended up adopting them into their army as mercenaries, because one, they were mercenaries. In fact, the loyalty of the Gallowglass was very thin. In fact, as long as they got paid by somebody, their loyalty belonged to them. The problem is, that's actually what caused most of the downfall to the Irish and later other groups. And probably to the Gallowglass itself, because one, Gallowglass ended up fighting against Gallowglass in various battles. In fact, it was later during the years of 1315 under the reigns of Robert Bruce and Edward Bruce that they hired Gallowglass mercenaries to fight with them in the Irish War of for Scotland's control of Ireland, mainly against the Normans. Now, there's a little information on how many they actually bought, but it stated the way they fought was so ferocious that even the many Irishmen that fought alongside the English switched sides because of this. But yeah, now as y'all can see, I'm just dressed in the attire of the 13th century. Hopefully by next year in the month of March we will get back into the Gallowglass, and we'll probably have to choose between the mid period and the late period of the Gallowglass warrior. So yeah, y'all have to stay tuned for that one. But anyways guys, how about y'all watch me duke it out and swinging these axes around, shall we? y'all saw, me moving around in this equipment, it is light and yet effective. But man, with the weather beating down on me right now, woo! Yeah, I'm just glad it's a cloudy day right now. Now the equipment as I'm wearing is supposed to be light and effective, but I can see why the Irishmen probably removed their footwear and such, because man, right now I'm burning up in this thing because of the gambeson. So, what do we know about the Gallowglass? As y'all saw, me moving around with the weapon, I am fiercely charging towards y'all. That's because this is how heroic these guys were. These guys feared nothing. These guys didn't even fear death. So, just imagine if you're a Norman knight or an Anglo-Saxon and you're having to face off against one of these guys. Probably the biggest chance of you probably surviving is to run as soon as possible. Especially when you start to hear the Gaelic war cry. Gaelic noetica. Now, there are different variations on what they said. Some accounts stated they yelled out their chieftain's name. Some accounts stated they yelled out for the cheer of God. Others, so it varies from variation to variation. So I don't have much information on what they would have yelled. Now, as you all saw also with the axes, the shortest one I had was this. This is probably the monstrosity axe that I have ever owned. And the fact is, this thing is heavy as hell, and this is my training axe. But I've never trained with it while moving in armor. So yeah, that was actually probably the first time y'all ever see me do that with this thing. 'Cause God, this thing is heavy. But now as well, also many of you saw that I was also not using my sword most of the time. That's because more than half of the time there are accounts that stated the Gallowglass rarely used their sword. In fact, rarely any of them ever had a sword. So this gives us the much information on what equipment they could have actually really worn. And in fact, because mostly the sword is mostly a ceremonial sidearm, or in this case, what would be used by the medieval knights. And mostly you had to be wealthy enough to own one of these. And if I am wealthy enough, I could own it. So yeah. But the problem is, lower class Gallowglass would probably just have had a elongated dagger and an axe. Now, also many of you did see me using dual wielding with my sword, axe, and knife. There are accounts of Gallowglass doing this. In such a ferocity of the time period, it stated that when they lost their great axe, they would charge ferociously still with nothing more than an axe and dagger in hand. So much so that it horrified their opponents as they saw them, the weapons of their opponent, not even managing to make a blow. This could be saying something about these guys, to state the fact that they did not care if they died. So you could automatically say that the Gallowglass were like a late medieval or a high medieval period version of the Berserker, if you would. This is probably why I love these guys so much. Now, I have also seen much information about the Gallowglass, mainly from my father's old history notes, when he actually himself was what you would call a hobbyist historian. So, he loved history, I loved history, you see where that goes. And the fact is, I read most of his notes to understand these guys, and we can see why they would have been like this. In fact, I feel like a Gallowglass charging at my opponents, rather than, well, fearfully hiding behind my shield. In fact, I do not need a shield, I just need to charge at you, to slay you. This is probably why the Gallowglass are so misidentified in history. In fact, many accounts actually state that the Gallowglass were even non-armored units that threw spears and such. That is actually incorrect. That would be the Irish kern. The Irish kern would have actually done that. There are accounts of them also wearing yellow, but during that point in time, it's very hard to understand on what the Irish kern units or levy spearmen and archer units would have actually been to the said Gallowglass. Because one, as we said, the Gallowglass were mercenary units and did not fear death. They charged into battle ferociously in order to hack at their opponents. So we can see why. But anyways guys, hopefully you like this video, like and subscribe for more. And if y'all have any ideas for another how-to video, let me know down in the comments below. I'll be happy to take a look at it and hopefully we can do it. Now, if y'all wanted me to do a infamous warrior from Celtic culture and you didn't see it this month, let me know down in the comments below and hopefully we could actually do it next year. Anyways guys, it's been Celtic Templar. Hope to see y'all in the next one. Have a great day, y'all.